can an entrepreneur be a Stithapragna? How can we as entrepreneurs adopt an attitude of handling the play of opposites? So let me pick up today's talk by referring to a couple of shlokas that make for a very, very interesting thought. There is a shloka in chapter 2 called Shloka 52 and 53. It's very, very nice. And Swami Chinmayananda, someone from whom I had the good fortune of understanding what the Bhagavad Gita is at a very young age, I must say. When I was 11, when the last thing on your mind is to sit and understand and read the Bhagavad Gita. But he has some very interesting thoughts on this as to why is it that we react and not respond to a reaction that comes into any action that happens to us. This shloka talks a very interesting point. He says there is something called a moha kalilam, which is this delusion trap. There is this trap of delusion that comes in. How does this happen? When the intellect, the buddhi, and the manas, and there is the connection between the two, what happens is that if this is the buddhi and if this is the manas and this is the buddhi, then unfortunately something called a wheel of ignorance, according to Swamiji, comes in between, what he calls the avaran shakti. This wheel of ignorance comes in between you and what you need to be doing. When that happens, the reason why we react, again Swamiji tells us something interesting, is born out of what he calls the Vikshepa Shakti, which is the power of projection. All the time as entrepreneurs, as individuals, we are caught in a very interesting trap. And what is that trap? Number one, we are trying to be what we think the world wants us to be. So the world wants me to be, bold, it wants me to be courageous, it wants me to be daring, it wants me to be a risk taker. That's what the world wants. And that's what the world is telling me constantly. This is what you should be. This is what you should be. And I'm trying to be that way. Or what I think the world wants me to be. Little more dangerous. Because here I am thinking that the world wants me to be, very courageous, or I think the world wants me to be very risk taking, etc., etc. It is this particular trap that we get into which makes us very reactive. The last 21 years, we've seen so many people get into this trap. And when we ask them saying, what are you doing? This is the kind of answer that you're given. That this is what I think the world wants me to be, or this is what the world is expecting me to be. In the process, forgetting who you are and what you really are. Who am I? That is something that an entrepreneur really, really forgets. And in these two shlokas, we're introduced to a very interesting concept, which is how can you be someone who is nischala and achala as far as your intellect is concerned? How can you be steadfast? So Arjuna asks Krishna a very interesting question at that time in Shloka 54. He says, Krishna, all this is fine. How does this person, who is this Stithapragna? How does he behave? How does he act? How does he talk? How does he walk? What is he, how does he do these things? Can you explain this to me? Now, here is another challenge that we all get into in life regularly. You see, we have all the time when we are looking for a role model, and I think today we've got some fabulous role models in Lata and Vivek and Samik and Ramesh and Dipti here. We're trying to figure out what did you do? How did you do what you did? I think the interesting conversation to have today with them is why did you do what did you do? Why did you do how you did it? What was the why that made you do the what or the how is more important than the what and the how. And, this whole question that Krishna is asked by Arjuna is a very interesting question. Tell me what he does. Tell me how he does it. But very, very interestingly, the answer that he gets is more about the why and not about the what and the how. So as entrepreneurs, we are looking for that role model. We want those role models. We want to understand. We want to decipher. If there is some way that I can get into Lata's mind and figure out saying why, what did you do with women? How have you done it? More than that, the why. And if you saw today in the beginning when they talked, a lot of them talked about the why in addition to the what and the how. So we pick up action. The first shloka that we're going to be actually talking about today is a very interesting shloka. And this is shloka number 55. And I'm going to request Dipti to help me with that particular shloka. Dipti? Yeah.
Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmaneva va atmana tushtha sthita prajnasthatochyate. The Supreme Lord said, O Parth, when one discards all selfish desires and cravings of the senses that torment the mind and becomes satisfied in the realization of the self, such a person is said to be transcendently situated. So, coming to the point of Stithapragna, if you're looking at Stithapragna in today's time, to me, as I believe, being a woman entrepreneur, and for the last 21 years I've been in the business, I have found that Stithapragna is basically a state of mind where your mind is calm, composed, and probably at peace with yourself. So when I'm still in business, of course, but when I had started the business, and as a woman, we face many more challenges than a guy does. And one of the biggest challenges is managing your family. Yeah. So we have professional challenges. We also have personal challenges. And that was the time when we were young. I had a young daughter, and balancing between the two becomes a challenge for us. So when I started doing that and I started actually using the balancing of act between the two, I realized that Stithapragna state, that which we often define as peace, comes to me when I have a perfect balance between the family and the profession. Because that makes me calm, that makes me happy and satisfied. So when that satisfaction is there, then I am able to focus more on the priorities. So this is my experience when I was looking at balancing and coming up with a solution for professional and personal issues. When I'm also talking now, when I'm talking to young entrepreneurs, especially women entrepreneurs who have families to look after, I always tell them that yes, especially the startups, when you're beginning, you have big dreams and ambitious ones, and then nothing wrong. You need to be ambitious, to move forward. But there is a payoff there too. Yeah. So my suggestion to all of them is that if you have to follow your dream, do follow that. But also look into the fact that if you can do it at your own pace, while the targets have to be achieved, while the certain numbers have to be, but if you do not fall into the trap of what others want you to do, or probably get pushed into things that and you follow what your pace is, you can still achieve your Atma Santushti, because then you would know that yes, you are at peace with yourself. This is what I think Stithapragna is.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dipti. So let's examine this particular shloka from an entrepreneur's perspective. Thank you, Dipti. That was very nice. So, if you were to look at this, what are we being told? He says manogata, which is whatever arises in the mind, and then he says sarva kama, sarvan kama, which is all the selfish desires that come into the mind. If you can get rid of it, okay, prajahati. He says then you become a stithapragna. How? If you develop this tustaha, which is being satisfied with what? Your own self within yourself. The whole point is that we get trapped into believing what I told you a little earlier, the Vikshepa Shakti, as we looked at, or what I think the world wants me to be, or what the world wants me to be. Now, if we can come out of that particular trap and we can become a sthita prajna, then guess what happens to all of us? We are going to get into a situation where we are not going to get into that trap of being somebody who we are not. As entrepreneurs, this is the state of mind that we need to be in. That look, there is so much more that I can do. I'm not saying be close to that. But at this point of time, let me begin by figuring out how I can focus on what I have and figuring out how I can get that to play.